Everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. Sound familiar? Yeah. Well, as I served the church in the Diocese of Los Angeles, a congregation where I concluded my ministry there when I retired, you can see how retired I am, 2013. For 13 years, I had a congregation and a school, preschool through the 8th grade. And was it a busy place all the time? Never knew what question you might get asked on your way to get some really important thing like paper clips. Reverend Liz. I loved it. What kind of things do you learn in kindergarten? Well, Mrs. Pratt, who taught kindergarten for 35 years, could sure answer this question real fast. Be on time. One of the things she noticed over the years was that it was getting more challenging for that to be just an understanding. That children were being dropped off at various times. So it would seem like we had to do a few more parental meetings. You know, parent night at school. Be on time. Had to be taught to them and the children. Please and thank you. Wonderful concept. And not excessively difficult to teach, especially if it was something they really wanted. Isn't that the case even with grandchildren? Share. Sharing. In our preschool 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, parallel play is more the custom. But as they get to kindergarten, they're much more interactive in their play, and learning to share becomes a major kindergarten piece of the curriculum. Play by the rules. Well, in parallel play, you have your own rules. Nobody bothers you. Now we have to learn to play by the rules. Raise your hand. Don't interrupt. Maybe I ought to take this list down to Washington.
Oh, boy.
Now, Jesus could have said to those people asking him those questions in the gospel today, everything you needed to know you should have learned in kindergarten. And the parable is really about that. Wow, the harvest is plentiful, and my barns are small. I think the quote is, the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few, but his quote was, the harvest is plentiful and my barns are too small. So I have to build bigger barns, store my things and my harvest. So Jesus has some very basic, elementary work to do, doesn't he? He walked into a situation in his earthly ministry where they were going through the motions, but the heart wasn't in it. There are a lot of rules, like 600 and some. And if the rule police were around, boy, you better be using this plate and not that plate. Things like that. Important things like that. But Jesus said, you don't worship the rules. You worship God. Well, aren't the rules about God? Maybe, but they have become the object instead of the facilitating information. Oh. I'm also, one of the things I did in the Diocese of Los Angeles is I built a new church. You know, when the bishop sends you somewhere, you can go, okay. So that's when I got this stove somebody made for me. He sent us out to 5 acres of oranges and a farmhouse and said, build a church here. So my vine doesn't have grapes on it, it has oranges. Leaf meal. So I met with these folks who were the pioneers. Came out to the 5 acres and a farmhouse to help do that. And the city, they didn't want a church there. Churches don't pay taxes. It took us 5 years to get a building permit. When the city realized we weren't leaving, they finally said, okay. However, we knew, the children knew, the grown-ups knew, we were the church. We gathered under these orange trees. We had a sailmaker make us a sailcloth to keep the shade, little shade. When it was terribly raining or windy, or, it did get a little cold once in a while, we go in the farmhouse. We could get 60 people in that farmhouse. And we did it. But you know what happened? And sometimes we were sort of sorry we got the building up because these other people came. We called them the settlers. And you know what they called that building? The church. And the rest of us knew we were the church. That was our building. But that's what happens. That the best intentions and the understanding we have grow and evolve into other things. And pretty soon buildings are called churches. And the people are just gathered there in the church. Ooh. I would say this to that. Let's pray that our buildings don't become like the parable of the barns. That all of the wonderful things that God gives us and all the promises we learn about and pray about and know about and sing about, that all of that is not kept in our barn, where we can go in and appreciate it all because we are allowed in there. Let's not make that mistake that the buildings become like that, full of the glory and the sounds and the prayers and the riches of God's promises and our growing faith in those promises, that we don't keep them in the barn. Let's let them out. Some of it's like, we leaked out into the lawn today. We're supposed to be in there. There are people who won't come unless we're in there. Hey, get out of the barn once in a while. Come on. Remember, you are the church. I am the church. You are the church. We are the church. Together, all of God's people, all around the world. Yes, we're the church. Together. Pray that all those fancy dressed people in England sitting in that big barn called Canterbury, don't forget this. This is what you learn in kindergarten. Play by the rules, share, please and thank you. And what Jesus said, get out of the barn. Be the people of God all the time, not just when you're there. But you are the riches of God. You are the blessing of God. You are the promises of God. They're not left in the barn. Whenever you leave the barn, you take that with you. Let's celebrate that. And I know it sounds scary. Bless a different kind of church, isn't it? Where they go around on the street and be like that. Yeah, maybe. But when you show up somewhere, have you ever eaten popcorn with no salt? That's a bad diet. You are that salt on that popcorn out there that has none. When you just show up, you can flavor the situation. And if we keep it all in here, and it's never going to happen. Don't become a salt-free church. No matter what they tell you. Take the goodness that we learn and share together in these beautiful places. Take it with us when we leave, because it's not to be left in there. It's to be taken out there. Amen.
Amen.